Uh, Steve, you sent out a bunch of really useful questions, but uh,
Probably too many.
I, I thought
I have I
that
have a I have a red line version.
um, I don't know if you saw it. I offered up a little bit of a consolidation. There's
Oh,
something
that's great. No, I did
weird.
not get that. I swear. Let me see. And that came from you. I did not see that. Let me hang on. But let's see here.
I've dropped it in this doc. There's something weird going on with the formatting here.
Yeah, I've got it. I've got it. Now I found it. It was in my junk mail. That's appropriate. Um, Praveen and Kathy, you guys have the Peggy's consolidation.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Um, so Peggy, do you want to start since you created this? Is good.
Good. Um, let's see.
You've
Yeah,
got
so, you know, ba basically the idea is we each take a crack at how we're seeing the purpose of what we're doing, and then we can step back and see if a clear um, uh, working purpose emerges from what each of us offers. Um, then have our conversation that pulls from the things Steve brought up. Who needs to be involved? Uh, what kinds of structures are we imagining? Where do we start? And I added in checking the status of the two actions that we named last time, and then ending with, you know, where from here, who will be doing what, and just check out on how we're working. So
so
I guess I'm repeating myself to kind of also stall by answering this question of uh, how do I see the purpose for reimagining bookstores? And it strikes me uh, it's something about uh, supporting uh, bookstores to thrive and independent bookstores to thrive in a time of change.
yeah.
And um, anybody wants to join me on taking uh, notes?
I can also transcribe the conversation, into Otter, and it'll
That's
summarize it
true.
well. So you don't need
That's
to
true.
write anything. I can just do
Okay.
that. Um, yeah, I think that it's a really good question. Um, the question, when Lisa and I a long time ago queried all the people that we had involved in bookstore beyond bookstores, it was like 20. It wasn't a huge number of bookstore owners, but they came from out of the conference, out of the Reimagining conference. And we thought at first our intention was that we would deal with a big issue that they all wanted to talk about, which would be a cultural political issue like book banning. And we specifically said, there's already a lot of people talking about banning, so maybe it's something else. And then what came back, the feedback we got was they thought the issue was bookstores themselves. Um, they wanted us to have a discussion about how bookstores can survive and thrive. And so the question then becomes, is it contextual in terms of there is a particular time right now when bookstores are particularly in danger, or is it an ongoing issue with bookstores just being able to survive and be sustainable and be healthy, which I think Kepler's has proven there is a solution to. So I take the latter. For me, it's the latter.
It's interesting because my title to the purpose falls right along the same lines. I wrote down reimagining bookstores, creating a path to thriving communities. And then I looked up the further thriving communities under AI, and it said signifies a state of success, growth, and well-being more than just surviving.
That's perfect. Praveen, what do you think?
Yeah, so I've always had an agenda. uh, unlike most people who get into bookselling, I did not get into bookselling because I like the idea of being a bookstore owner or just kind of like doing bookstore management as a career. I gardened because I had an agenda, and because I have no sense of time. I thought the agenda would get accomplished in 2 years, and now here I am. What is it, like 17 years later? So obviously the agenda is lot more drawn out and is continues to evolve. And my agenda always has been uh, to find a new sustainable model for bookstores. And after all these years of work, what I'm coming to the conclusion is that it's actually an entire paradigm shift for bookstores. And the paradigm shift is to basically re-envision bookstores as community-funded, community-operated spaces that are primarily run for the benefit of the community. And it's not primarily a book selling channel. And books are part of it, but it's really the larger literary, cultural, civic needs of the community that that these spaces should be there to serve, and that requires a shift in identity and purpose of the institution of the bookstore. That requires a shift in the funding model. That requires a shift in the governance model. That requires a shift in how the operation is actually managed run. And so I mean, I think the purpose that I'm excited about is just continuing to articulate it, evolve this new paradigm, articulate this paradigm, and help people understand that there's a whole new paradigm available to them now. After so many years of work, and work is not just Kepler's work. I mean, now there's so many other bookstores, who are doing this kind of shift.
That's excellent. Yeah. I think that Elisa just got on, I think. Um, Lisa, she's coming. There she is.
Can you hear me? Let's see.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna leave my camera off for a second so I get situated. So
We've just started and we were talking about the central sort of purpose or mission for the organization and what bookstores most need. And we've all talked, so you've come in just the right moment.
Actually, I wonder if it would be each of us to do, uh, by way of bringing Lisa up to speed, uh, a one sentence uh, version of what each of us said. Um, I'll
Sure.
repeat mine a little bit to what I put in the chat, which is supporting indie bookstores to find their path to thriving in times of change. And a little commentary. I think. Well, I'll hold off on that. That was what I said.
Yeah, and I thought Lisa, I was explaining how we surveyed bookstores, and they said we're not interested in outside issues. We're concerned with our own issues of survival and thriving. And I don't think that's contextual, Peggy. That's the only different. I agree with Peggy entirely, but except I don't think it's the times we live in. I think it's always been an issue. Praveen, you talked about starting 17 years ago. When you came in, it was a huge issue. Still is. And I think the issues are largely identity and reaching out to a community, not just selling books, but actually creating a community.
Kathy.
Yeah, mine echoed Peggy's almost exactly, creating a pathway to thriving communities.
There's a nuance though, Kathy. You didn't say community bookstores to thriving communities, and bookshops are the pathway
Yes,
towards that.
correct.
Interesting. Yeah. Praveen, did you have a?
Yeah, and I was saying that I've had an agenda from the very beginning of my journey as a in the world of bookstores, and my agenda has been to find a new sustainable model for bookstores. And at this point, I think bookstores need to evolve into a new paradigm, which is their community funded spaces, their community operated spaces that are run primarily for the benefit of the community. And that requires a shift in the identity. It's not just a channel to sell books for publishers. You're there to primarily serve the literary, cultural, and civic needs of the community that that the bookstore is in. Um,
So, Richard, Lisa,
Here,
you were
here. I think that's. I'm not going to say it as eloquently as I just heard it, um, but I want to underscore everything I just heard. A pathway to community, a new experience, and paradigm. When we say reimagining bookshops or bookstores, we're in a post Amazon society where book sales occur. That transaction is different, and what the work of bookshops is perhaps the same as it always has been, but with a different level of emphasis on the community building and the book culture aspect, the experience around books. Um, and Praveen, you said something, the community funded, community sponsored. I think that is the emergent pathway, that the community ownership, whether that's psychological or fiscal, or nonprofit hybrids, co-ops, whatever the model. I think that ownership is an important aspect today of the reimagination. So I can pull all of those threads that you just said, that you guys said. And Steve, you've always been saying beyond bookstores. So I think it's also about creating a bookshop world, a culture, when we say community, that extends beyond the walls of the bookshop. Um, Yesterday afternoon at a craft brewery, a group of people met to make crafts between 2 and 3 p.m., as they always do on Sunday afternoons. It is one example of nearly 1,000 that I can give of community that's happening beyond the walls, but because of and through the bookshop in Cookeville. So and it's a total nonprofit. When people walk in, we say, "This is your shop." And they bring things and they leave things. And, I think that's part of this reimagining exercise. So, and our purpose, I think, is to help the industry see that and embrace that, at least those who want to, the adopters who want to do that, um, to because they're doing very innovative and wonderful things.
so as we listen to each other, I'm sort of leaping ahead to see if I can pull the strands of what all of us have been saying. And right now, I'm thinking my starting point is the purpose of reimagining bookstores is to support bookstores who wish to embrace a paradigm that offers a pathway to community. It's not quite there, but
We're missing the community
thriving.
funded, that Praveen brought in, the community contribution, the community. I don't know. We're not wordsmithing it right now, but it's a community effort to create this space.
Well, it's somebody said something about ownership and participation on
Right.
the part
So
of the community.
for me, that would be one of the principles.
Okay. But not
Uh,
one of.
is that if I'm looking for something that can roll off the tongue, I don't know, and I one opinion, but I would see it as um, you know, embracing community ownership or um,
Um,
I mean
Peggy,
that's it.
I'm
Yeah.
a Lisa knows this about me coming out of advertising. I'm a big believer that you can't write anything in a group. You can get the principles down, the point, the content, but somebody else needs to write it, at post meeting. So I wouldn't worry too much about the wording. I think what Lisa, I think what you were just saying is that the one thing that's missing is kind of community ownership. Otherwise, what Peggy said was perfect.
Uh, and I just threw in the word thriving to thriving community,
Yeah.
um, which I mean, if you does everyone feel ownership needs to be um, to me that's implicit in the pathway and explicit in the naming of principles. Um,
I think I agree with you, Peggy, especially because as we think about the word, riffing off of the public word that we've talked about a lot, a public park is something a lot of people use. They don't necessarily feel an ownership for it. Um, and yet it is their space. Some of them feel an ownership. They will sleep there during the day or picnic or use it in whatever ways they will. And it's not quite that level of, it's more participation and shaping.
yeah.
Um, but I agree with you, Peggy. I think that's more unpacking the principles of effective community building and what it means to build something that's shared.
So,
There's a kind of consciousness to it, community consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Kathy, what did you say? I couldn't quite hear
Community consciousness.
you.
Yeah. Yes. An identity that comes with the sharing of it. Yeah. What I love about a thriving bookshop is that it becomes much bigger than the people who create it.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Where do you guys think you mentioned this in part, Praveen, where do you think the new paradigm fits into all this? Because that's probably, Peggy, as you said earlier, it's probably like a bullet point underneath whatever the purpose is, because it's the new paradigm is how you get there. But that's become so important to Lisa and I in terms of all these bookstores that we've brought in to talk about what they're doing that's non-traditional and breaking the mold. And that seemed to me implicit in reimagining bookstores, and like we were talking, for instance, we were talking about Smith's bookstore in down in Morgan Hill, and how it's fairly small and doesn't. He's really smart, but the store doesn't represent a whole lot of new things other than doing author events on the sidewalk, which I always loved. And But I was pointing out that he's somebody who's taken an active interest in the community he's in the mall, in saying that the new, in a way, the new, uh, pilot store, the new central store for real estate is bookstores. As Macy's and Federated goes away, people come for other things, a movie theater, but they really come a lot of times for the bookstore. And that was true in my community in Brooklyn. We all were devastated when it closed because it was our community center. And I think, Praveen, you've done that with your store.
And it's worked with Third Place Books here in Seattle, which is built around that third place.
Right.
Um, if you think it needs to be more explicit, we could talk about supporting bookstores who wish to embrace a transformational paradigm that offers a pathway to thriving community. But I
Mm.
don't.
Support
It
supporting leaders who want to support What was the second word? Who are we supporting? Was it
I said bookstores. I'll,
bookstores? Okay.
Lisa, at the moment, well, you're not in a place to get on the web. We've got a notes document, but
Yes. Okay.
at the moment it's just Praveen and me in it. That's that was the latest wording. Um, you
Bookstores are
know,
with.
to Steve's point, if are we close enough in that one or two of you could take a rough cut and spend some time between now and when we get together again and make it even more attractive?
I think that's. I think so. Yes.
Yeah, I think I would vote for the two greatest writers on the call, which is Praveen and Lisa.
I think. I. I
No,
think.
I'm in awe of you, Lisa. You just spew stuff out that's brilliant always.
That was not even, but I'm happy to look at it. Praveen is really
Yeah.
this began with your energy, and I'd like to keep your words. You're so good to invite and listen and pull us in and develop things. I think I'd like to see your wordsmithing on it, but I'm happy to help.
Praveen, do you,
I think I'm going to take a approach slightly different than Steve's. I think having multiple eyes look at it will actually make it better and more complete and more holistic and more broadly appealing to people. It's been in my the words that I'm using have been in my head for so long that it's kind of uh,
Do they have a sell by date?
I don't know.
I,
So
No, I
I,
think we would review it, all of us. I'm just saying that it's easier for a couple of people to talk it through and write it down because trading adjectives and adverbs doesn't work real well.
it is interesting that I think over the past the years since reimagining there, Peggy, you asked this last time, what have we learned since? And there have really been some things that have remained constant and some things that have evolved. And for me, letting go of this word paradigm, letting go of the old paradigm of what a bookshop as a pure book oriented retail space is really interesting, and but understanding that the value, malls are coming back, malls are on the move, the mall is returning to America,
no,
and kids and the young adult are interested in, and brick and mortar matters in a different way because it's almost kind of gone away, and now we're kind of shifting back toward brick and mortar experiences, and bookshops are the richest of those experiences, and millennia old, the places where community has always gone to be born and to reform, and more than ever, and to your point, Peggy, about timing, right now we have become so isolated, so insular, so distracted on our cell phones, addicted, that we have forgotten how to have basic relationships. Kids today don't know how to have a date or how to have a conversation in a relationship. I'm witnessing four different grandchildren who are starting like they are 7 years old, going, how do I talk to a girl? And they're 18, you know, and these are not problems that I had when I was 18, and or that my mom had when she was 18, but just the basic relational thing. And so this is a moment that we're meeting with the bookshop, um, in a way that's different than other brick and mortar. But other brick and mortar, I talked to Anthropology today, and they're calling it not a third place, but home. They say welcome home when somebody walks in, and they, people bring pies and other things, and they're trying to create an experience because otherwise, why have a brick and mortar space? Um, because it needs to serve a different purpose today, and that is true for Anthropology, and it's true for the bookshop. But the bookshop gets to hold this unique spirit of community, which is different. Sorry, I'm waxing long, but I've been on a long trip, and we put bad gas in the car, and accidentally, and that took an extra 4 hours. And I've had a lot of time to think today.
So I'm, um, it's all great points. I'm wondering if we have a common enough picture of purpose. Um, I'm in a bit of a dilemma because I know for me, something like this evolves when I have a chance to sleep on it. So we have a beginning. Um, and I'm wondering if anyone wants to take a cut at its evolution and share it, and over email, um, we can refine as we go,
Yeah.
uh, with the idea of it being something that can be shared in an invitation to others, as this is our starting point.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I think that Praveen and Lisa can do a draft. They run by us, I think. I'm also concerned about moving to the next steps, being a producer, about the question of paradigm and examples of new, like Lisa and I in our regular monthly thing have highlighted certain stores like Library in London, which is amazing, but this bookstore Cleo's in Brooklyn. I'm not in Brooklyn. I'm sorry, in Berkeley, which has a completely different model, and is quite successful. And actually, Lisa, you're in New York. There's some other bookstores that are doing the same thing, which is they're also bars and they do events, and they have and then in the case of the Berkeley store, Cleo's, the display is not by categories, which I'm always fighting because then people just come in and go to their category. They don't browse. So the question for me becomes, too, is are we going to talk about two or three examples to demonstrate, so it's not just all about words, it's about concepts?
I think um, there's nothing in here that says everybody has to do it the same way. And maybe that becomes a principle that, the specific form differs by culture and um, um,
Mm-hmm.
what's the right word?
Inspiration. I mean, maybe that's not may not be the word you're looking for, Peggy, but it's a form. When I think of I'm in New York now, so there's hundreds of restaurants and they're all different experiences. And
Right.
you would go to a restaurant versus grabbing some food to eat in your room because you want an experience. And they're wildly different experiences based on probably using some of the same foods, but based on an inspiration, an idea, community kind of coming out of that. I think in some ways bookshops are, if we do this right, I think I love this idea of no two are the same, maybe, or that
Yep.
that um, if you had 10 bookshops on within 10 blocks, they would all be wildly different experiences of community and nuances, not the same. And that's one of the things that I think Daunt is missing, frankly, if I may talk among friends and not be repeated. Going in Waterstones, multiple Daunt bookshops, multiple B&N bookshops, and multiple, what's the other one? Waterstones. There's another one that Daunt
Those are
has.
those are three main bookstores, yeah.
Three, but there's a fourth one that he owns in London. They were all the same experience, a little bit different architecturally, but broadly the same experience. And that's one of the things I love about an emergent paradigm is that they are Libreria and King's English and Kepler's are different experiences and differentiated experiences. And I don't know, maybe that's a bar too high, but it does. I think there's certainly room for them to be um, a sense of local, a sense of local been shaped by hands in a way that reflect those hands and hearts.
I
Yeah.
have had a recent experience. I'm not a bookstore owner. I think you know that, but um, I had a recent experience that kind of ties a little bit to this. Um, my daughter lives in Evanston, which is a suburb of Chicago, near one of the big universities. And at any rate, she took me in and out of all these little shops for blocks and blocks and blocks. And every one of them was a tiny little store. Some were indie bookstores, some were, you know, Parisian French jewelry, just all kinds of different things. And I ended up asking the owners in these shops, how long have you been here? And most of them said 35 to 40 years. And then I said, well, do you compete with one another? You're all jammed into this place. And they said, well, we didn't want to, so we decided to create community weekend events where everybody goes to every shop. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's incredible.
We're doing it. Is it next weekend? Where's Waldo? I mean,
Oh,
where you have
really? Yeah.
it's
Okay.
a national
Cool.
thing where you you know everyone is facilitated in Waldo appears in all of these local shops, and everyone walks and collects and things, and that's actually a national indie event that is
But really,
yeah, it's really fun. But making that a part, an art prowl that goes around, and I think a lot of bookshops are doing that, or part of their community of. It's a great
yeah,
point.
it
Yeah,
just meant so much to see that.
because
It really,
you're adding a layer here because community is on two levels. Community among these small shopkeepers that
exactly.
that
All
are
knowing together.
collaborating for economic. You know, a strong town has its identity in its local shops.
Yeah.
You don't think of these big box shops and identify any town in America. But if you think of a town or a space, it's the little spaces that define it. So when those little spaces join together in community, that's that and we have evidence that a bookshop elevates those other shops, and that's what you were getting at, Steve,
Yes,
um,
exactly.
more than any other retail. It consistently has an elevating effect that we're measuring
Is
actively. So
Yeah,
that's,
I
I
could
think
feel
the
it.
community on two
Yeah,
levels: the people who participate and partake, and the people joining them in the economic community.
exactly. That was wonderful.
Yeah,
and is there actually published research on on that about bookstores, Lisa?
not published yet, but
But it's
Ryan
in the works.
Ryan Raffaelli at Harvard, who did the independent bookstore study, he and
Mhm.
I talked a few times about it and agreed that I would spend the first 3 years, which were about at the end, collecting data in Cookville
Oh,
um, with 6 area um, adjacent retail spots, and try to do year over year data and provide him with something that might be publishable. I've also been asking across the country where I've seen, like in Camden, New Jersey, the city council offered incentives to bookshops, and that's been happening in a few places. And I've inquired, I don't have strong data yet, but I've inquired as to what prompted them. Was it a feeling, or did they have some data of any kind to want to incentivize a bookshop? But I think if
Also, Lisa, there's also an ABA study that was done a while ago that they didn't follow up on, unfortunately, but that studied this real estate impact question. How does a bookstore draw and create, a locus for an audience that then benefits the other stores? And there is a study that we should try and get. The people that told me about it said, that they didn't continue, which they should have.
it was kind of a good start.
Yeah.
Um, I'm familiar with it, but I can't lay hands on it at this moment. But that was a good start. And what we have, if we gather this data and we can say that bookshops have a unique elevation point, we have a really great negotiating point for people who are leasing spaces. So we can go to a landlord and we can say, anchor, and I'm doing that in Gainesboro right now, Tennessee, and saying, listen, you own this whole block, you wealthy man. You have a hotel and you have a restaurant and you have these other things. You need a bookshop, even though you can't make a bookshop pencil right here, but you need a bookshop and you need a nonprofit bookshop and you need to fund a bookshop and give it free rent for at least 3 years, because it's going to elevate your hotel and it's going to elevate your steakhouse. It's going to elevate everything around it. And he agrees. He happens to have a background in publishing and be a bibliophile, but I think there are those landlords in the country. And this, I think this data is, when we talk about reimagining bookshops as community spaces, I think this can be part of the work to say the impact, the economic benefit to local cottage businesses, to local entrepreneurial businesses that are doing the work of creating community downtown or in any town, that bookshops are a vital part of that. And if we can,
I also like the idea of unintended consequences, or maybe intended consequences, which is if you start with the model of a bookshop as the destination that spreads an audience, then it changes. This is what you did, Praveen. You then changed the bookshop to more adhere to that model. A traditional bookshop where one person is sitting and reading a book and they don't even say anything to you. And you go just to the sci-fi section because you're looking for a specific book and then you walk out. That doesn't fit the model at all. But what bookstores are doing more and more, like some of the ones like you two have, Lisa and Praveen, are reinvented already around the idea of community. And that's a journey that we have to continue. And so it leads me to the question. I always think of this, which is the resistance to change by bookstore owners, by booksellers, young and old. Because of the economic pressures on them, and because they're not business people. They came in as book lovers, not people who thought about the mechanics of how to get more community attention, how to, sell more books. And as Lisa's, you and I pointed out in our class, this is not our class we're doing for the professional books school of Eileen's. We start out by saying, this is not about how you sell books. That's not what we're doing here. We're creating community. And then the consequence, the unintended or the intended consequence, if you will, sorry, is you do sell books. And Praveen, that's what you surfaced too about living wage, which is if you do, there's certain techniques you can approach if you're trying to get to a living wage that actually improve your profitability, like starting a nonprofit wing that then is not selling a product for somebody else. It's not an outlet like a dealership for cars, for publishers, but it's actually its own thing that has this big benefit, and you can become a member and you pay these extra fees to support it. And so I think for me, I just know the thing I'm really struck by is how obvious the answer is, but how hard it is for people to achieve that kind of paradigm change. And that's what reimagining is about in a way.
I agree with you, Steve. And I had a ding, ding, ding Montessori moment, Kathy, connecting to your Montessori. And if I may, when I was in school, I had a professor, developmental psychology professor, and he said the worst teachers to him were the professors, because if you asked them what they taught, they told you about their subject. They told you all about developmental psychology or whatever. And he said the best teachers, in his estimation, were the first grade teachers, because if you asked them what they taught, they told you about their students, about the children in their room. This is the paradigm shift I think we're in as booksellers. If you ask a bookseller what they're doing and they tell you about the books, they're more in the paradigm of the university professor. If they tell you about their people, they're more in the paradigm of the first grade teacher. It's sort of like the Montessori shift, that we're here. We may love books, but first we love people and we love community and we love seeing people thrive together. And we want to build that around and through books, because we know books are the most powerful means that we have to do that. But books are the method.
Yeah.
Not the thing. So I don't know that kind of
Love
connects.
that. Thank you for that. And, the quintessential phrase that Montessori used in her scientific work all her life is, we're an aid to life.
Aid to life. Ooh,
Yeah.
I just got chills.
So imagine your bookstore as an aid to life.
Oh, I love that. An
So,
aid to life in Cookville, an aid to life in Palo Alto, an aid to life in Sebastopol.
Beautiful.
Uh, we're trying
so
to make the point that books can help with almost every cause you care about.
Mhm.
I want to say every cause you care about because I haven't found one that we can't help. Um, Sexually abused children, grieving people, people who have identity crisis, people who have, name any displaced children or children who are incredibly ahead of their times and feeling socially awkward. Books can help with all of these things. So if we see books as the aid for our society and what our society needs today, then this is how we move this flailing country forward in a different way. Um, anyway, sorry. I'm
so
Love it.
I, d- I think we have a center of gravity around purpose and a start of principles. And so my question is now what?
Yeah, mine
What,
too. Mine too, Vic. I'm
you
with
know,
you. It's like, where does the rubber hit the road?
given this purpose, um, who needs to be involved? Um, what kind of structures give us a place to start? Um, where, uh, given this, where do we begin?
Yeah, and central is, how to say this, is are we as is reimagining as an organization or a network as you portrayed it, Praveen, does it exist to create the change in bookstores? The bookstores exist to create a change in themselves and their community and their role in the community. What's our role? We're once removed from that. Is our role to enable them to carry out that purpose? And if it is, how do we, then right now we're not going to figure this out, but how do we, as a group, instill that or institute that? Because frankly, it's been really hard for all of us, I think, to get other people who own bookstores to adapt and change.
Yeah, well, I think Peggy wrote this. The purpose of Reimagining Bookstores, to support bookstores who wish to embrace a transformational paradigm that
Yeah.
offers a pathway to thriving community. I mean that totally resonates with me. Um, because at least at this point, this many years in, I do see, and I'm sure Lisa does as well. Frankly, I'm flying to New York tomorrow, where Lisa is, and we're going to be sitting around for 2 days with the 40 other bookstores that at some level or the other have embraced this paradigm. I don't know how
Here.
clearly each of the even those 40 participating bookstores understand it. These are the bookstores, in Emerson Collective's, cohort. I'm sure there will be some, who basically just said yes because Emerson Collective showed up with money, and they're like, yes. My first answer is yes because you got money. But I think it'll give us a good way to just kind of get a sense of how clearly even these 40 bookstores embrace this paradigm, and then there's plenty of others who are starting to embrace different aspects of it. But by and large, this is still not a well-known, well-understood option or an alternative to the traditional paradigm. The traditional paradigm is just so overwhelmingly everywhere. Oh, you want to start a bookstore, you're going to take out a loan, you're going to cash out your retirement plan, you're going to take out a high interest, credit card, debt, and
Yeah.
then you'll be drowning in that, debt, for the next, 10 years, while you're figuring out why your bookstore doesn't make enough money to even pay yourself a wage. So that's the established paradigm. It just, as Lisa was saying last time, she's people approach her for building fixtures, and she spends talking them out of that and advising them on how to finance their bookstores. Yeah, so I think the good thing is I see lots of evidence that many bookstores are climbing on this new paradigm, but our opportunity is this is still not well articulated. It's not socialized. It's not out there. Our view, which we have remarkable amount of convergence, between the five of us who are here, this is not out there in the world in any significant way. Where somebody who's starting a new bookstore or somebody who has a struggling bookstore on their hands can interact with it and say, oh, there's another option.
Well said. Well said.
So it causes me to circle back to one of the activities that we suggested last time, which is telling Kepler's story.
Yeah,
And
and I think, as I said last time, I think it's more than Kepler's. I think it's a story of these new paradigm bookstores.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and to your point, Praveen, and I'm so glad you're going to be here. I'm excited. That there are 40, but I think among the 40, there are probably 20 that are strong exemplars or have been building strength. There's Emily Liner at Friendly Books, and there's Calvin, and there's all these. There's some really good seed spaces that have embraced a new paradigm and a new playbook, and are doing things differently. And that, Steve, this goes back to your dippers, divers, skimmers, dippers, and divers, and the idea that if you have 10 or 20, I mean, you have a movement. You
Well,
have
it also leads Lisa to it also leads to the question I raised in the long list of questions, which is, do we try and broaden and get more people involved, or do we focus on the people who are actually activist bookstore owners? It's like, and then if we do, well, I favor the latter actually, and then you eventually go to the skimmers, but you start with the divers, right? And they also are very influential with the levels of less participation. And the question is, it's Peggy, it goes to what is the purpose, and then what is the practice of reimagining bookstores? What's the practice? Because it's a tough row. I mean, that's what Praveen just underlined so eloquently.
the practice is one of, Steve, your marketing. I mean, helping people see what's happening and what options they have and understand the impact of those. I talk to people literally every day who are, heart in their hands, stars in their eyes, opening bookshops. And, I would love to be able to point them at something to read, something to review, something to listen to that would open their eyes to this emergent hybrid paradigm or the nonprofit paradigm or the things that we're talking about. Right now, the only things they can find, the best tools they can find are, the PAS workshop, which is a good workshop. But it's, and it embraces that hybrid paradigm, but there's very little out there that they can really grab. I mean, the ABA has resources, but that's kind of rooted in a different idea. And so I think when you talk about the practice, there's a marketing practice and there's a product here that shares and enables people to see what's happening that's working.
so I'll offer a couple thoughts. One, I certainly remember the curve of the marketing model, or the adoption model from my MBA days, but almost 50 years ago. You work with the pioneers and start attracting the early adopters. And I'm a great believer in working that way. You work with the people who are ready and tell the story. So, I take your point, Praveen, that it isn't just Kepler's. And that takes me to, I know you have gotten stories told before. Is there a storyteller? I know there's a documentary in the works. Are there other written things? And is there someone we can recruit to tell the story?
The most articulate bookstore owners that Lisa and I've had on our podcast are probably DJ Johnson in New Orleans, and then Calvin Crosby. Calvin Crosby was absolutely, I don't know if you've seen the video, I'll send it to you again, or for the first time. And he was absolutely spellbinding. And then the moment that I remember, to be a little random here, the moment I remember is the most transformative was actually when Praveen, you were trying to explain why having a nonprofit arm had made you more profitable. And swear, I'm like, a small businessman looking at it saying, this is brilliant. They should all understand this. And we kept repeating it and trying. But it was hard for people to wrap their heads around the fact that if you're not selling a product, but you're selling a mission and you're using that as well, you'll become more profitable. You don't even have to sell more books.
It's really kind of the Disney way too. I mean, if you look at that. But Praveen, I agree that that was a powerful moment. And we've seen there's I think it'll be interesting and a great opportunity in the next couple of days as we're here with Emerson and we're here among some of these leaders to kind of look around and think about this question of telling story and of getting voices. And the documentary is I haven't talked to Doug in a long time well, since January, since he filmed with Unlikely Story. Do you have a sense of how that's going?
I know that they are doing some editing now of everything they've been shooting. They seem to be kind of in the final home stretch, but I've not actually seen anything from them.
Okay.
So it actually sounds like one of the actions from here is for the two of you, while you're with Emerson, to shop this, test this purpose and principles with others, and see if there's a storyteller there who might be willing to tell this story.
Ann Kellberg has really been focused on, with Book Post, on telling the story of the independent bookshops. And she's been focusing on a different one. And she is legitimately one of the best writers I've ever read. I mean, Washington Post and all of her things that she did, but she writes so eloquently and beautifully. And she has been studying this hybrid model and the nonprofit models and the emergent models for the past, 3.5 years at least. I think she is an ideal storyteller to ask about this and to tell her what we're thinking and see if maybe we can engage her help. What do you think? I mean, I'm seeing you nod, but it looks like.
Yeah, I don't know her. I've not met her because I didn't come to the gathering the last couple of years, but I've heard of her. Yeah.
She's been at the gathering each of the past 2 years. Last year she moderated her Book Post. I read all the time, and I encourage a shared read. She always spotlights an independent bookstore. She's really looking deeply, and she connects the dots in such an incredible, elegant way. She is the reason that Emerson is involved at all in bookshops. So Ann Kilberg is got the attention of Mona, and Mona, you told me about Mona. So, but Anne was the writer associated in writing about bookshops, and I think that is kind of a full circle moment. She is going to be facilitating. She's going to be tapped to facilitate. She came to Cookville as part of one of the groups that came to explore bookshops and have a workshop, and she just is really has gone deep on the bookstores and bookshops, and she is a storyteller. So she popped into mind, Peggy, when you said that, and
So will she be at this meeting the two of you are at?
she will. She will indeed.
Would you approach her?
Yes. If you guys think that's a good idea, I think that's
Sounds great. I also think if, and having worked in film in the past, I know how long it takes to get a film done. But I think if that documentary were number one, excellent, and then it came out soon, we could use that as whatever the part of the relaunch. You almost need an object, you
yeah.
know.
And Praveen,
Great.
I know that your voice is in there. I don't know who else is in the interviews there, but you have several. There's 5 or 6 people that are talking about different things, and I'm not sure the direction that the documentary is taking. But with Jeff and the Unlikely Story, I think it's about the way that community gets formed around a bookshop, and the bookshop is central to and vital to that idea. So I think it's very much
So
in
the
line.
documentary is, she's not involved with that, is she?
She is not. She is not.
Okay, so we're talking about two different
We are.
media for telling the story.
We are.
So,
Yeah, well,
so
we could, Anne could chronicle what we're doing and what's going on, and we could use the documentary as the talking point. I mean, Feroce, VR Feroce, who's partly funding the documentary, um, Praveen, he's on my board at Heyday, and he's an amazing guy. He would know, number one, where they're at, but more importantly, maybe is he's always used video. It's weird when you go down to SAP. He runs the experimental division of SAP, and when you go to his shop and with all his people, he's always using video to talk from, and he's a pretty good filmmaker. I was really surprised.
Yeah.
So, which I think is a great principle. It's not like this film is going to tell you what to do. It's just a way of starting a discussion.
Yeah. I think there's very much a space for writing, a space for film, um, a space for interaction. When we talk about, you ask the question, what is the practice? Um, I think it does kind of need to be bound around a thing, a structure of some kind. And Peggy, you're the queen of structure. You and Kathy, structure, organizational structure, and infused. I'd be curious as to what thoughts you have about. But I like. I mean, Ann Kellberg, and we've got this ripe opportunity in these bookshops that have been following for 3 years. More, you're working in your 4th year, aren't you, Praveen? This is because you were part of the original group that was tapped, I think, for Emerson. So there's a really nice. I mean, to have 40 different bookshops here. There's an emergent movement. Lorraine is coming to the end of the workshop, I believe. So there's a real interest at all the levels of Emerson Collective. I think this is a really important moment. And there is the National Constitution Center and Jeffrey Rosen are teaming with Emerson to do something with bookshops as well. So I'm pulling in threads that I think are all part of this reimagining community. It's the civic crisis, the literacy crisis, and what books can do.
I just have one thing that's come across my mind. I briefly mentioned it, I think, the last time, but just as an observer of bookstore people that came to our course over the course of last year, we noticed that the individuals who have already been through some first takes at professional development, Praveen sent a couple of people from his store. There were others who had gone through some iterations of coming to imagine what this means, this thing called community,
Mm.
and how you enter enter into a time of dialogue and that there's so much conversation that needs to happen. Those that had already had that previously to coming contributed so deeply to our work, to our discussions. Those that were just first in were just completely, they just didn't even get it at first.
Mm-hmm.
And we're challenging, why do we want to have a half day off from the store and put everybody together in a room? And those sorts of pushbacks. And I guess what it makes me realize is that this takes a number of years. Bookstore owners, if they are creating this purpose, have to know that there's a number of years that you're going to grow into this, and that it takes more than one iteration to get everybody on your staff to buy in, and probably the community to buy in too. It's an evolution.
Well, I think you're right, and even as much as a buy-in, giving buy-in comes with the opportunity to shape it.
Exactly.
You know?
Yes.
So you're building it together. I mean,
Paradigm shift too.
yeah,
Yes.
and that creation, like any garden or anything else, takes a bit of time.
It does. So that's a caveat everyone should understand in beginning to embrace this.
So something I mentioned this when we last met, and it's in our notes, that it's something that I have observed in networks that thrive is there are three legs that ultimately come into being. Uh, One is some kind of nucleus that provides focus and direction. That's where the notion of purpose and principles come into play. That, as it becomes more sophisticated, you find ways to measure it and ways to coordinate and, ways to continue to uh, evolve it as we learn. But that sense of um, I used to call it common focus and direction, but um, the second is community building, connecting people, sharing practices, supporting, having the means to support collaboration. And the third is competency building, which is some of the work that you all have been doing and what this storytelling, I think, falls into, supporting learning, consulting where it's wanted and needed. And that those are kind of over time, the functions that seem to keep it alive. And I'm thinking while it seems to me your time in New York is a perfect time and place to see who's in, who sees this as an opportunity not just to help themselves, but to help a broader shift. And that, one of your assignments is, to use this kind of first draft of purpose and principles as a way of discerning who wants to play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Peggy, I love what you just said.
Me too.
My mother, who was involved in the co-op nursery school movement back in the 50s when I was a little kid in Sausalito, California, which was a really bohemian town. She got all the parents together with one father who was a contractor, and they went and tore down a Navy building that was donated and built the nursery school together. And the nursery school only had one employee, my mother, because everybody else volunteered a day a week as their tuition. And that nursery school is still going and thriving. But that start by they spent a year on weekends, all the dads and the moms helping out, building what I think are four buildings on it in this what's now very valuable property, created this co-op nursery school movement that's still going in Sausalito.
You're illustrating the importance of participation, and
Yes. and doing, not just talking, but doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're building beds for children that don't have them, and it's amazing how they keep coming out of the proverbial woodwork that grandparents and others are nominating via Facebook. I need a bed, or because my child doesn't have one. So the community is doing these heavenly bed builds. Now, it would be far more efficient to build them in our factory or any place else. I mean, but in fact, it's about 4 times the work to do it as a community build. You have to pre-cut things, you have to bring them to a reconnoiter site, you have to organize the work, you have to put it in such, and by the time you did it, you could have built the boards, built any one team of 3 could have built the beds 4 times over. But the act of building them together and the fact that the community comes in and does them is very important to the work. So they ship all the materials and they pre-cut all the materials and they get everybody out and they give everybody a job that keeps them safe, and they get these done, and then they take them out to the homes, and they're doing real good. But this principle of participation is critical to the whole thing. We moved the bookshop, and it really was a lot of added work to get help from the community. It would have been far easier to move things across ourselves, but we organized in such a way that we had small boxes and other things that we could have a brigade and we could have people help. And the community remembers bringing the books over, and they're so glad they helped bring it together. That participation, and it is the job. Creating participation is the job. It's not just getting it done, it's how we do the job. So how do we apply that principle to this reimagining piece and get that participation, give them an opportunity to build it? That's what you did in the first reimagining workshop. It was the first stab at that level of participation, of building the beds, of building the thing. And there may be another structure and a part 2 that kind of comes in and lets people continue to build on that. Or maybe it's a smaller version of that structure that is just by invitation only to 20 people who want to play larger than their own backyards and want to be helpful in a bigger way. So that's maybe we take something about that and something about the structure that you created before.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think the way of saying it is that we develop a clear purpose for reimagining, but also that purpose only resonates and works if there's then a practice that to institute that purpose. It's 2 sides of a barbell.
Yes and no. I mean, we seeded it out there, and there's a tremendous amount that's happening without any kind of hub moving it on its way. So I think we talked last time about using an organic approach, and I put that in the principles. And, I think we'll learn our way into, let's see, Harrison Owen, who created open space technology, used to talk about, what's the minimum amount of structure to enable the maximum amount of participation that moves us towards purpose. And I'd like to take these last few moments. I've recorded several actions. I'd like to review them briefly to see if they sound right, and if there's anything we want to add or change, and then have a couple minutes for checkout. So if you're good with that,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll drop these in the chat. The first one, we talked about, doing some kind of take this preliminary draft, somebody take it, do whatever revisions they wish and share it. And actually, let me check, what's the timing? When do you leave for this meeting?
Well, Lisa's already there in New York, and I fly out tomorrow morning.
Okay.
Meeting is
So
on Thursday and Friday.
maybe you just work with what we've got, and any further refinement comes out of what you learn by um, sharing it um, at the Emerson Collective meeting. Does that make sense?
I can get the transcript and then a summary points out today in the next hour or two.
And we've got it here in this document, Steve.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I
so,
meant from this conversation, I mean all the points in the conversation could be reimagined, if you will.
uh, that
But
is
I,
the
but you're right,
action.
Peggy. That's I think if to the extent you're not waylaying the Emerson Collective's practice, I think it'd be really good to draw on them because that is a select group, carefully selected group.
Yeah. So it's the task is share the draft purpose and principles at the Emerson meeting for feedback and revision. And
Yeah.
that's Lisa and Praveen.
We'll have to find spaces in the edges. It's a well-packed schedule, but I think we'll, if we look for that opportunity, I think it will present itself.
Yeah. I mean, there are always water cooler moments. Um, Telling the story of the new paradigm, what I've got is Lisa, you'll ask Ann Tilburg whether she'd be willing.
I think it would be another water cooler moment with me and Praveen
Yeah.
and Anne, and then but yes, and I put her name spelling in the chat.
Saw that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't have it even close.
I should
Do
also over her book post so that everybody could see what I'm talking about in terms of I just think she's been spending an awful lot of time observing this Emerson group and everything that's happening. I think she's poised. She's already a storyteller, so poised to do more.
um, and the other item I'm wondering if is necessary. Does someone want to check on the status of the documentary?
Do you want to do that, Praveen, or I can do it through? I've got to talk to Feroz about some things anyway. So
Sure, you do it.
okay, I'll do that.
Um, and then I guess we have this, you know, it's I got this twice. Uh, at Emerson, shop purpose and principles for feedback and find out who else wants to play. So a little broader. Is there anything else?
Why don't
Um,
we, Peggy? Why don't we all meet in a couple of weeks or week and a half or whatever? I don't know everybody's schedule, but the Emerson thing will take up this week. And Lisa, what's your schedule like, and Praveen, yours like?
Yeah, a couple of weeks would be good.
Like 2 weeks, maybe. What today's what Tuesday? Same time in 2 weeks.
2 weeks would
uh,
be great.
Okay. Make that
and
happen.
if you, yeah, that's fine. Steve, you'll put it on our
Yeah,
send
and I'll
us.
figure out what went wrong with the link too on the Zoom. I don't know.
Okay. The other thing is, are you okay if Lisa and Praveen find some other fellow travelers and invite them to that call? If there are some who wish to be here?
Might be starting all over again if we did that, no matter how intelligent they are. But I'm open to whatever. What do you think, Praveen?
Well, I like the when you're talking about divers and skimmers, kind of, like building maybe a small group of divers. who are well along in this journey of embracing the new paradigm, but might have approached it, in different ways. And at least having, one or two conversations with a group of divers who are well along. And, DJ could be part of that, Calvin could be part of that. And frankly, I think there'll be some who are not in Emerson's cohort, but are still, well along, this kind of paradigm shift.
I agree.
Okay.
Agree. So
How
I
about
agree with you, Steve, that it's starting all over again, but not in a bad way. Every time someone new enters the group, it's a starting. But if we looked to have a diver cohort together for a next layer, I think that would be helpful.
Okay.
so I'm not clear. Is this a different meeting or
Same meeting.
what?
Well, I
This
think,
is
yeah, I think for now, Lisa and I will just bring names, to our next, meeting of this group, and
Okay,
we can share, what we, know about the names, we're going to bring, and then if we want to form a, diverse cohort of some sort, I think we should, discuss that at the next, meeting of this group.
Thumbs up.
okay. So names, not people, and we'll figure out what form a meeting with a larger group takes based on what you learn.
Right. Yeah. One step at a time. Names first,
Okay,
people second. Yeah.
the original concept of skimmers, divers, and dippers was a marketing thing that we came up with at Campfire, my old agency, and the idea was, and I think it fits, that the divers are the people who are intensely involved, but they influence
right.
the dippers, and then the dippers influence the skimmers. The skimmers are 80% of your audience. The divers are less than 10. So it was originally, at least it's changed a little bit for our class, but it was originally an idea of who do you focus on that's then going to activate the other people. So
There
I
you
think if those names, if you brought people who are as articulate as some of the people on this call, or as Calvin or DJ or Paul from City Lights, it'd be great because they could help spread the word.
they're your influencers, is what I hear. The divers are the influencers.
The key influencers, yeah, and then
Yeah,
the people in between, in the middle, are also influencers, but they're getting their message from, it's kind of like publishers who look to the staff of bookstores to sell their books. They're not
right.
talking to their publishers don't talk to the public; they talk to the bookstore. Yeah, and
So,
exploit them too. For being right, they exploit them.
um, so any other actions, or shall we move to a quick close?
I think that is a lot of action.
That's a lot of action.
That's a lot of actions, mostly landing on the Emerson meeting. So um, plan on a lot of water cooler and over dinner.
Well, one
Um,
one consideration, Peggy, for that is something that Praveen asked originally for this little meeting, which is what are we doing? Where's the gap? What are we filling in? What's Emerson doing as opposed to what we're doing? And that's something that you guys, Lisa and Praveen, have to be kind of confidential about, but you'll guide us in that because we certainly don't need to be doing the same thing twice.
Yeah, I mean, I think some differences are already starting to become clear to me. Because the Emerson work has been going on for like 3 years now, and it seems they are very focused on the hybrid structure and the hybrid model almost as a product. Um, Whereas, I think for the work, at least, I've been doing, and I'll be curious about, Lisa's, take on this also. I mean, for me, the nonprofit model, the co-op model, the hybrid model, I mean, these are just tools. I mean, these are just tools in pursuit of a larger, goal. And the larger goal is this, community-centered, vision of, the bookstore. That's what, we've been pursuing. Um, and frankly, you can depending on the community, you can do that as a strictly for-profit model too. So it's not So I'm less focused, myself on, which version of the legal structure or the legal model, but much more on the community centering of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Lisa, what do you think? Is that kind of what you take from the what we're seeing from the Emerson Collective versus what we are focused on, or do you see it differently?
I do. I see, I don't have my head around it yet, but Emerson is trying to create a supportive framework for activity. The kind of activity they're hoping for is the kind we're talking about. So I don't think they see themselves as the creator of the activity, but as the holder of the space. And they're trying to document some of what they're seeing on emergent models and legal structures and find ways to be helpful. But it's really very peripheral to the action, which is driven by the people in the center of that. And what you started was something they really valued with this reimagining idea. And so now with this fertile garden to pull it in and say, "Ooh, I want to create this," I think it's very much in alignment with what the support structure that Emerson wants to create, but they're looking for something like this to come out of that structure that they can support. That's why they reached to the National Constitution Center. I think that's at least that's what is emerging from me. I mean, the reason we're visiting the publishers is because of a conversation. They're looking for how to follow and support with structure in things that are working. And I also want to reinforce what you said, Praveen, that there are plenty of examples outside of this cohort that are not labeled or as legal nonprofit or hybrid models that are in fact doing this same kind of paradigm shift work. And I think it will be important for us to pull those in. And so that's beyond the bounds of what Emerson can do. So I think we're both supported by and beyond what Emerson's doing. If I got my head around that right, I don't know.
No, that's great. I agree. Well,
So, by way of checkout, I thought I'd try a completely different kind of question, which is this is our second um, meeting. How's this working out? Do we need to adjust how we're working? Um, so, any reflections on how we're working, and if there's some larger reflection on what we're doing, that too is also welcome. So,
Feels like progress to me. Feels really good.
I like this tight little team. And Peggy, I like what you're bringing with structure and questions. And Steve, I love that you're bringing in this whole marketing perspective and this idea. My sense is that is going to be so important to this work. I feel privileged to be in among this group, and I like the way it's working. And I'm looking forward to an expanded version. And thank you. Thank you for doing this. I like I like what's happening.
Iggy, what do you think? You're the expert.
my measure is how is it working for the people I'm working with, um, and which is why I've selfishly asked the question. So it sounds like it's working for at least two of you, and the unasked question for me, and I save it for our next time through, is looking at who makes up this system and are we reflective enough of it. So that's the question I'm just holding for when the time is right.
Yeah.
yeah, Peggy, I think your facilitation, your masterful facilitation is quite key. And I do think we are making progress, but I think I have to give you credit for facilitating us in a way that we are hearing each other, finding the common threads, and building on what each other is saying. So thank you for just doing what you do so well.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much, Peggy. It's been really helpful. This has been, I went to a building workshop at Reed College when I was up there for my class reunion. It was about 50 people. It was the total opposite. It got worse and worse, not better and better.
Yeah. And I love what everyone is bringing to this. I mean, we all have some shared perspectives, some different perspectives, but I love what everyone is bringing to this. It's a good group.
Will you have your Kepler
Kathy.
story out soon, or what are you and Amanda creating something, a document, or what are you doing?
Um, no, I mean, I was going to take an old white paper that Paul Wright and I had worked on, and I was thinking of freshening that up. Uh, but I've not done any work on that since last week. I've just been busy with other things.
It's a great model.
Kathy, anything by way of checkout? Kathy, can you hear me?
Yes,
Oh,
I'm very happy to be here. It means a lot to me having been through a whole year of leading this course for bookstore owners and staff. To hear what you're moving into next in such a beautiful way. My whole educational career has been on paradigm shifting. So it's really meant a lot to me to just be here. Not so much for you, because I'm not really giving you any contributions so much as just uh, being here as a keeper of your wonderful wisdom. Appreciate it.
So sweet.
thank you. And I think part of the strength of your being here, Kathy, is you bring an outside perspective with, hints of an insider view. So you get to be a mirror, which is quite useful. So cool.
Okay.
So
So I'll send out an invitation for 2 weeks from today, same time, and then I'll check. I guess we lost Lisa, and then I'll check on the documentary, and I guess Praveen, you and Lisa will explore the riches of Emerson, and also come back with something maybe that you've written up,
Oh.
and I'll also send out the transcript.
thank you.
Okay. Bye bye. Have a great
So
afternoon.
Bye.
bye all.
Sure. Safe travels.
Thank you.
Yeah.